Hello and welcome to our Tacoma Astronomical Society online video. My name is Alice Few and I'm a volunteer with the Tacoma Astronomical Society, and this video covers astronomy online tools. Specifically, Stellarium, the downloaded version. There are two flavors of Stellarium, the online web version and the downloadable version. Briefly, here are some of the pros and cons of the two different flavors. The web version, there is no download. It's fast, it's easy, it's very simple. It's great when you are using a computer or a tablet where you can't install anything, you don't have permissions. And it apparently works very well on phones and tablets. I've tried it on tablets and it's been fine, and I use a different app on my phone. But that's what we have on the web version. That being said, the downloaded version has a lot more controls. There are things that you can control on the downloaded version that you just don't have control over at all on the web version. There's a lot more detail. You can personalize and save settings in the downloadable version. There are a lot more objects to see, but there is a steeper learning curve. It takes a lot more practice. That being said, I use them both and find great reasons to use either versions of Stellarium. Alright, so to get to Stellarium, the download, you go to stellarium.org. And I'm not going to go through the installation for Stellarium. There are just too many versions and too many different types of operating systems and computer configurations for me to do that justice. So instead, I'm going to point you to the user's guide. The version that we're using for this video is the most current at the time I'm creating the video, which is 0.20-1. Alright, so as you can see, Stellarium is available for Linux, Mac, Windows, and we've mentioned the web version. Alright, so the key features that we're going to cover in this brief introduction to Stellarium is how to set your location in the viewing application, how to set and manipulate time. That's one of the fun aspects about Stellarium, is being able to pick times and pick dates, either forwards or backwards in time. We are going to search for very specific topics, so we'll look for specific objects in the night sky, and we're going to show you how to plan a simple viewing session. Alright, so at this point, let's go ahead and switch over to Stellarium. So when you first enter Stellarium, it will look something like this. The newest version automatically defaults to trying to guess where you are based on your computer settings. But that's the first thing that we're going to show you, is how to set your locations. So there are two main interactive bars that you will be using. There's the one on the far left that once you get there and hover, will pop open, and that's the controls that you'll find here are the location window, the time and date window, settings, searching, configurations for setting specific configurations that you want to preserve. There is an astronomical calculations window. This is especially handy if you're using this for a class setting, and then just a regular help. The other navigation bar lies across the bottom, and that includes the on and off, which is at the far right hand side of this bar, and then there's the time manipulation, and once we get to a nighttime sky it'll be easier to see these. On the far left hand side of this bar are the ones that we're going to use the most: the constellation lines and labels, the artwork, and then controlling the ground and controlling the atmosphere. Alright, so let's start with setting our location. You can see at the bottom it's defaulting to Federal Way on planet Earth. If you don't have your Wi-Fi set up right now, if you've got that turned off or you're offline and you've just opened it for the first time, oftentimes it defaults to Paris, France, Earth. So let's change that location. So I'm going to hover over the left side of the screen so that menu pops up, and go to the very top and click on location window, or F6. Alright, so I can move the arrow around to pick a location that I want to observe from. I can also search in this list So I'm going to search for Tacoma, Washington. And so there it pops up in the search. If that wasn't available, I could figure out what my latitude and longitude are from Google Maps or my cell phone, and I could put those directly in here as well. You can use a GPS. There's other ways to do it. Now, I want this to be my default location from now on. So I'm going to click the use current location as default, and I'm going to save that. So I'm going to go ahead and close it, and now I can look down at the bottom left hand corner and it shows me that I'm in Tacoma. Okay, great. So now I am close to where I am observing tonight, and so let's go ahead and change the time. So you can pop open the date and time bar. And so this is handy when making kind of big jumps in dates. So we're going to leave it for today's date, and then I'm just going to jump forward in time. And you can see what happens as I jump the hours forward. The sun's going to set, and I'm going to move into nighttime. Well, now there's another way to do that. Remember how I talked about these bars down here? The lower bar going to be much easier to see once we have nighttime. So here we are. I have these playback buttons, just like you have on your remote control for your television or your VCR or a gaming console. So I have backup time, I have pause and play time. I have this downward arrow, which is set me to the time it is right now based on my computer, and then fast forward. So I can go back to the time where it was, and this is kind of what's fun. Is I'm looking to the south, and I can see that from the cardinal directions, and there's the sun, and I want to see the sunset. So currently, if I just have it playing, you can tell by the seconds I'm just running in standard time. Well, it'd be a long time to wait to get the sun to go down. So I'm going to fast forward the sun. So I'm going to go to that fast forward key and press it, and you can see that time is starting to speed up, and then every time I press it I am changing the speed up time faster and faster and faster. And so now you can see the sun approaching the horizon. I'm going to put my mouse over the play pause key so that I have control to pause that time when I want to, and there's a reason to do that. Is right about here we have the sun is down below the horizon, but we still have quite a lot of light. So there's a lot of the sun's light that's bouncing around in the atmosphere. But I've got a hint. So I have, the default is to have all of the planet hints turned on. And so look at this. We've got Venus pretty far away from the sun, and we know she should be following the sun, the path of the sun. So let's go ahead and speed up time just a little bit more, and let's watch when we can first see Venus. There it is. So even before it's completely dark outside, we have a really nice view of Venus. All right, so let's go ahead and speed up time a little bit more until we get rid of most of the sunlight. And here we have, and it's dark. All right, now as you can see right now, I am still moving forward in time, but at a normal rate. And I don't want to move forward in time at all. I just want time to pause. I wish I could do this in real life, but I can in Stellarium. So we're just going to pause time here. And so we can talk a little bit about some of the other controls that we have. So you can see we have major stars like Betelgeuse and Aldebaran and Capella named and highlighted, as well as our planets. So one of the things I could do is if I click on Venus, on the left-hand side, it's going to show me all sorts of information about Venus. It's going to tell me what it is. It's a planet. It's going to tell me how bright it is. It's going to tell me, exactly what its address in the sky is. And we can talk about that in a later session. But another thing that happens is while I'm on Venus, if I hit the space bar, I can kind of lock Venus into place. And then by doing so, I can now start zooming in and zooming out on Venus. All right, so if you have a mouse with a roller on it, you can use the roller to go in and out. If you're using your keyboard, it's usually the page up and page down. So we're going to page up and move into Venus. Now here's something that's interesting already. This is Aldebaran, and so this big V is the face of Taurus the Bull. So I'm going to get rid of some of that kind of extra background information by right-clicking on my mouse to get rid of all of the information about Venus so we can see more of the sky. So this right here is the face of the bull, Taurus the bull, and here are the Pleiades, or the Pleiades. And so those are the seven sisters. It's also known as Subaru. So take a look at all those logos on the Subarus in your neighborhood as you go out for your walk. And that's what it is. And so I'm going to get a little bit closer and zoom in a little bit more. And the Pleiades are an asterism, right? So they're not their own constellation. So if I come down here and turn on the constellation lines and the art, we can see that the Pleiades just sit in as part of Taurus the bull. All right, we're going to turn those off. And let's keep zooming in on Venus. Now here's something that's interesting. So Venus is a planet, and Venus orbits the sun the same way we orbit the sun, but she's closer. And so one of the interesting things about Venus is in her orbit around the sun, from our perspective, we can see Venus in phases, the same way we see phases of the moon. And so this is, if you were looking at Venus through a telescope, you would not see a full disk of Venus. You would see a partial disk of Venus. So I just wanted to share that because it's kind of fun. All right, so we're going to zoom back out. There's Venus, there's the rest of our Pleiades, and there's the rest of our sky. All right, so that is kind of manipulating time, and that's how we identify different objects and find out more information on them, is simply by clicking them. And if I was zooming in on something and I had not paused time, this is where it gets a little tricky. It's fine not right now when I look at it, but if I zoom into this particular object and I have not paused time, and I've also not highlighted it and searched it, they will tend to drift off of the screen. Okay, a planet, oops, there it goes. So now it's going to just start drifting off the screen because we still have time going. So another good reason to stop time. Okay, that's usually more fun to watch on a planet. All right, so time controls and then basic screen controls. If I left click, if I click on anything, I'm going to get the information. If I left click and hold and then swipe left or right, then I can move myself around the sky. This is just like me standing still in this open meadow and just turning my body, and I can look all the way around. I can also drag the sky up or down. The way you do this on the keyboard is you can left arrow or right arrow, up arrow, and down arrow. So there's a couple of ways to manipulate yourself as you go. Okay. All right, now let's talk about searching for objects. So we've figured out how to make ourselves go to a particular time at night. We've paused time. We're set where we want to be. And now let's say we want to find something. So let's go over again to that left sidebar and go to the search key, the search window. So in the search window, the default is it comes up with objects. So you can start typing something in here right now. So let's say I wanted to find Polaris. All right, so I can type in Polaris. It will give me suggestions as I go, which helps. And then once you accept it, it will highlight Polaris for you and it will jump to Polaris. So Polaris is our North Star. It's closest to our North Celestial Axis. And it's going to give us information about this particular double star that we have. So what I would like to do instead, so I'm going to get rid of the information. I have Polaris here. I'm going to turn on the constellation lines because I want to learn how to find Polaris on my own. Right? So I have the constellation lines turned on. I'm going to put it up in the sky more or less like what I'm used to seeing. And it's in the constellation Ursa Minor. So I turned on the labels by selecting that constellation label button, or you can use capital V. And so here's Ursa Major, the big bear, here's Ursa Minor, the baby bear, and Polaris, our North Star, sits at the tail of the baby bear. All right, so that's how you can use the search key. So let's try another object. So go down to the search window, and let's try for Sirius. All right, so that's the dog star. And so it's going to whip me around to the other side of the sky. And so here is Sirius. So here's Canis Major. And Canis Major is one of the hunting dogs of Orion. So here's the constellation Orion. Here's Canis Major. Ooh, and since I'm sitting here in Orion, that gives me another great idea for things to go searching for. So what happened if we went searching for the Orion Nebula? All right, so it's going to take me right there to that area of the Orion Nebula, and this is something I really want to zoom in on. So I'm going to go ahead and page up and zoom right in to the Orion Nebula. All right, and so this is the other nice thing about the Stellarium and the downloadable version is you do have a lot more astrophotography that's companioned with different objects in the night sky. So this gives me a chance to take a look at this nebula. And so this is a big star forming region in here, and in this cluster right here we have all sorts of new stars and new solar systems being formed. All right, so there it is. And then as I zoom out a little bit further, it helps me learn that the next time I wanted to see this on my own, I've got the belt stars for Orion here, and then we normally see these stars as the sword stars. So what else is around here in this area? So maybe I can just zoom in and just start looking around, because I can zoom into this point and I can still drag and look for things in particular. And look, there's some really interesting stuff right over here on the far eastern side of the belt. And this one looks interesting, and it's the Horsehead Nebula. Okay, that's pretty cool. So let's zoom into that. And remember, once you select something, if you hit the space bar, it will center it for you and it will hang on to it. And I get right click to get rid of all of the extra stuff. And then I'm just going to zoom in and take a look at this. So there's the Horsehead Nebula. So this is a nebula and it's obscuring light, so we don't see the light coming through it. It's really dense. And it does kind of have that interesting horsehead look. Then there was something on the other side. And here's another kind of combination of nebulas. You've got this dark nebula, and you've got a bunch of gas over here reflecting light as well. And so this is the Flame Nebula. Okay. So all sorts of ways to jump in there and find different things. So we get a lot of questions about things like comets. And so sometimes if you go in here and you go to the search window, and if I wanted to look for the one that people are currently keeping an eye out for, it's Comet Atlas. And it's not going to show up. There isn't anything in here for that. So comets are things that are visitors. They come in and they leave. And so, their path and their velocity and how they're performing within our solar system is very, very different than the background stars and planets and asteroids and things that we have. So Stellarium often has to upload new information about these on frequently. But what they've done to make this really easy is they've actually created lists. So if you go over to the lists, and you can change the lists to all sorts of different lists, Messier objects and asteroids and asterisms. You can scroll down and find comets, right? And then once you search in the comet list, then you can jump to this most current comet that folks are looking for, and it's going to show us right here. So it's sitting in between Camelopardalis, the giraffe, and Ursa Major, the big bear. So once we get here, we can, zoom in. It's going to tell us about the comet itself. We've got time stops, so it should behave well. And then let's just zoom in. Now this currently is not a naked eye comet. It's a big binocular and small telescope comet. And there, let's right click and get rid of some stuff. So once we get in close enough so that we can see it, then the name is popping up for us as well. And they're showing it as kind of this fuzzy green object, which is how folks are reporting it as well. All right, so then that's how you find something that's moving a lot and also something that's a visitor. All right, so let's zoom back out. And then let's try something else. So let's go try another planet. So let's go back over to the search, and I'm going to go back to objects, and I just want to look at Jupiter. Okay, so I've chosen Jupiter, and it's pointing at the ground. Well, obviously Jupiter's not in the ground itself, but because I'm standing on planet Earth, Jupiter hasn't risen yet, so it's below my horizon. So I actually have to wait until the Earth rotates around so that I can see Jupiter. Well, the nice thing about being able to manipulate time is I don't necessarily have to wait. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to point myself to the east. I'm going to right click and get rid of all of the extra stuff. And for right now, I'm going to turn off the constellation lines and numbers. I could turn off the ground to go find Jupiter, but then it would be really hard for me to learn how to find it in the sky when I go out. So I'm going to put it in the east. It hasn't risen yet. So let's go ahead and speed up time and just see what's going on in the night sky. And here we go. Oop, a little bit too fast. There's Scorpius. I have planets turned on, and 1, 2, 3, we've got a crowd over here. So take a look at what's going on early in the morning, and we can look at the time, and let's pause it. We're at about 4:50 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, because we're looking at this from Tacoma. And we've got not only Jupiter, but Saturn and Mars all clustered together. So let's go take a closer look. Let's zoom in a little bit here. So I'm just using that wheel on my mouse or the page up bar. And so early in the morning, just before sunrise, we've got Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars all lined up here together. Now, here is something, this is where that zooming in and out feature is really, really nice and very handy. I've stopped time, I've centered Jupiter, right click to turn everything off, and let's just zoom in to Jupiter. Move the mouse out of the way. Oop, that's zooming out. Let's zoom in. Here we go. All right. So we have the planet Jupiter and 4 of its Galilean moons. So the 4 Galilean moons are the 4 that are really, really easy for us to see in binoculars and also in small telescopes. And they're the ones that Galileo first drew and reported. Jupiter has a whole lot of moons, but we're just going to look at these 4. So we've got Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. And what's really nice is that the movements of these moons are in Stellarium the same way the movement of the sun or the moon is. So if we center and focus on Jupiter, I'm going to turn off the atmosphere so that the sunrise doesn't interfere, and I'm going to turn off the ground so we can look through the ground. And the reason why I'm doing that is what I want to show you is that if we speed up time, all right, I'm going to have to stay centered. If we speed up time, then we can watch the movements of Jupiter's moons. And I've got to get rid, we'll get rid of the wobbly effect caused by pretending that we're a telescope. Okay, so there we go. And so we can sit here and we can watch Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto make their orbits around Jupiter. Now the sizes are not to scale, because what we're seeing is kind of a glow of those moons. So take that into consideration. But that's another really kind of fun thing that you can do with Stellarium on the downloaded version. All right, so enough of that. So let's go ahead and stop time and let us get back to our normal situation. And let's talk about planning a session. All right. Oh yeah, right. So I've got to make myself a person again instead of tracking like a telescope. Okay. All right. So so we've seen a couple of things. We saw some information, some planets coming up in the dawn. But let's say I want to plan an evening session where I get to see the last of our winter constellations as we move into spring. So I want to make sure that I can see Orion and Taurus and all of those, and I want to find a new constellation called Monoceros. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to approach it by pretending I don't know when Orion is going to be up. Okay, so let's do this. Let's go ahead and go look for Orion. I want Orion the constellation. So it's pointing at Orion the constellation. But the sun is still up, so I can't see what's going on. So let's go ahead, and I know it's over here in the east. So let's go ahead, and I want to get the sun down. So I'm going to speed on over here, and let's put down the sun, and I'm just going to use the most basic tools we have. Let's speed it up. Okay. All right, and then double check again. Orion. And there's Orion right there in front of us. Oops, I've got planet tracks on. Let's turn those off. All right, so those are turned off. We still have a little bit of sun, and I want to watch time. So one thing I can do is I can leave this time date window up and just move it out of the way, because I really want to know what time. I don't want to be up too late while I'm doing all this stuff. So I'm going to move this to when it's dark, and I'm watching time. And it's still kind of reasonable. All right, there we have our date and time. All right, so I think that this is Orion here, and I can double check by turning on those constellations. All right, I'm going to turn on the labels too. So Orion, people ask for us to show them Orion all the time, and so this is great. So I need to be, if I go outside tonight, I need to look off to the southwest, and I've got, the larger these stars show, the brighter they are. So here I've got some really big, bright stars. I'm still kind of at a reasonable time. It's still before 10 o'clock. I'm about 9:45. Let's pause time. And so I've got Orion, I've got Taurus the bull, I've got Lepus the hare. A lot of people don't realize that there's a little rabbit underneath Orion. Let's go ahead and turn on the picture so that we can see that. And then Canis Major, and then here's the one, the new constellation I might be looking for, and it's Monoceros, because it's a unicorn, and I thought, wouldn't that be a fun new constellation to learn? So Canis Minor is the little dog, Canis Major is the big dog, and Orion. And so this gives me a way to say, here's Procyon. I can click on that star, and that one's really bright. I should be able to see it. And here's Sirius, also bright star, and then there's Betelgeuse and Rigel. And these, if I use Betelgeuse, Procyon, and Sirius, I've got a triangle, and in the middle of that triangle should be this kind of V shape, right? So as a reminder, if I turn off all of the constellation hints, I can see, well, it might be more difficult than I think, because look, those stars are not very bright stars. And I happen to know that Tacoma has got a lot of light pollution, so maybe not the best. And the other thing that's going to be interesting is look at that moon. So we have a really, really nice bright moon, and if we go and zoom in and take a look, we're just past first quarter, so it's going to have a lot of light. So maybe a faint constellation isn't such a good thing for me tonight. So that helps me plan to do something else. I need to stick with things that are really big and bright, and probably things that aren't anywhere near the moon. So I'm thinking we go someplace else. So let's put our back to the moon, turn around and look north, and let's see what we can find in the north that might be new and interesting. So again, I can turn on the constellations, I can turn on the pictures, and look, okay, Draco. Now there's something I may not have gone out to find before. So Ursa Major, especially the asterism of the Big Dipper, is usually something really easy to find. I've got the Little Dipper right here and Polaris. These stars right here, Polaris and the asterism of the Big Dipper, are nice and bright, easy to find even when the moon's out. So halfway in between these two is the tip of the tail for Draco the Dragon. So I'm looking for a chain of stars that are going to wrap around the bowl of Ursa Minor and then double back on itself almost to the horizon, ending in this really interesting little quadrangle shape. So let's turn off all of the hints. Can I see that here? Here's the shape going around, double backing. At least I can see that head. So this might be an interesting thing to go off and look for tonight. So I hope that this has been helpful and it gives you a chance to download and play with a new application and help you with your nighttime stargazing. Again, this has been Alice Few, volunteer with the Tacoma Astronomical Society and our online videos.